So a few little housekeeping items that we need to take care of. First of all, we will have 1 credit of CCA credits for you, and we will be offering that icon at the end of the session so that you'll be able to be certified, and the steps that you will need to take to do that. The session will be recorded, and I guess I need to hit the record button. Somebody else already has. Okay, feel free to submit your questions at any time using the QA chat feature at the bottom of your toolbar. And you can also put where you're located in the chat box. You can also email questions to Rachel Cochran if you're having issues in regards to technology. She can be reached at Cochran, COCHRAN.474@osu.edu. And we might even have some poll questions or ask some other information from you. So in that chat feature that I mentioned, go down to that location at the bottom of your toolbar and tell us where you're from. What city and state are you located in? We like to see where our participants are attending from. And today we do have 3 speakers with us that will be presenting. And the farmer panel in February is addressing cover crops and how they relate to soil health. We have Leon Klopfenstein, and he's a farmer in Paulding County. We have Les Seiler, who's a farmer in Fulton County, and Nathan Brown, who is also a farmer in Highland County. Today's moderators are myself, Gigi Neal. I'm the A&R educator in Claremont County. We have Sarah Noggle in the background helping out, and she's the A&R educator in Paulding County. And also with us is Jim Ippolito from Ohio State University. Come back to that screen here. I'm going to stop share on this one. Change over to our presentation.
Well, welcome everyone to the second webinar series of soil health from the Ohio State University. And today online, we'll be talking about soil health with 3 producers in the state of Ohio. I apologize if I make a mistake pronouncing your names, but Leon Klopfenstein, Les Seiler, and Nathan Brown. And what I'd like to do first is to ask each one of you to introduce yourself and maybe provide a little bit about your operations, your field operations, or just operations in general. And why don't we start with Leon?
Okay, my name is Leon Klopfenstein, Northwest Ohio, Paulding County, heavy clay soils. Kind of grew up. My father used cover crops as long as I can remember with our heavy soils. Years back, when I say years back, 50, 60, 70 years ago, they used brome grass. They used a lot of sweet clover through time that kind of migrated towards the red clovers. Then we gradually, at one time, we had the government programs had a 4-year program where you had corn, beans, wheat, and then a year of set aside. That phased out over time, went more towards conventional, more moldboard plowing, continuing to use cover crops. And eventually we went back to a chisel plow, had some compaction issues from the moldboard plow, continued to use cover crops, and then I'm going to guess maybe between 15 and 20 years ago, we started, I won't say true no-till, but it would be like a no-till beans, no-till wheat, and then, or very light tillage for wheat, and then chisel plow ahead of corn. And then gradually we got away from that she's applying ahead of corn and went to no-tilling. And then it's kind of evolved from there. I have a 3-year rotation, corn, beans, wheat. Typically a rye cover ahead of the beans after corn. And after the wheat, we'll plant a cocktail mix and been planting green into that with the corn.
All right. Thank you. Sounds complicated. Let's go to Les. Les, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your operation?
Okay. Hi, I'm Les Seiler. I'm up here in Northwest Ohio, Fulton County. That labels us as the Western Lake Erie Basin too. And we're always chasing water quality issues up here. So we try to do the best we can to mitigate our losses on soil erosion and surface water runoff. Got a tile monitoring set up through Vinayak and Jay Martin's group in Ohio State on one of the farms that was a high phosphorus location for some reason. Nobody knows why, but learning a lot about what's leaving the farm as far as nutrients and stuff. And what we got started with, I farm with my brother and my son, and we got started back in 1986 with these terrible gullies we were seeing with erosion, and we just couldn't stand it anymore. So that's when we started no-tilling. Back when there was a PIC program, we got some help with a waterway and left some ground set aside and started seeing erosion problems mitigated because of that, and added subsurface tile, waterways, filter strips along ditches. We actually have a 2-stage ditch on a farm, and this whole thing that we've seen now, we've been in added pollinator stuff and finding out how this whole thing is connected with biological influence on everything, the beneficial insects, the crops we raise. We currently have corn, soybeans, wheat. We got barley for malt, and a field of alfalfa and a field of clover right now that probably will be harvested for forage or feed. And just finding that the diversity adds a lot of things to the land, and it's amazing what's happening out there. And keeping cover crops on stuff has given us the ability to grow a lot of the nutrients that we need for our crops following that. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think that's going to generate more questions along the way here, Les. Thank you. Nathan, how about you? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your operations, please?
Yeah, Jim, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. First generation farmer in Southwest Ohio down here in Highland County. So we're kind of right on the edge of Appalachia and where all the glaciers kind of stop down in here. So we've got a little bit of everything, but grew up working on a neighbor farm was kind of how I got started in agriculture and into farming. Once I had an opportunity to actually start renting ground myself, kind of was looking at how could I grow my farming operation. And coming from that farm was pretty much was full conventional tillage. I knew that wasn't, for one, I couldn't afford the machinery. I also didn't have the labor force to take on all that. So my operation pretty quickly transitioned over to no-till, which in our area, no-till has really become pretty much as a staple down in this part of the state. So was an easy transition for us. As I grew, got involved in other organizations and started hearing about water quality issues and seeing the erosion and the nutrients leaving my fields. I knew that I wanted to seek out a better way, and just happened to be driving around the neighborhood one day and seeing a neighbor. It was right after Christmas, had a drill out in the field, and I thought, what in the world's he doing? And a lot of people may have known or remember the name Ed Winkle. Ed's passed away now, but he was the one that kind of got me on the bug of cover crops and soil health. Began probably in 2010. My first year cover cropping, and we've grown our operation since that point in time. Today we farm 1,500 acres, and we try to be 100% cover cropped every year. We try to plant almost everything green. Just depends on how the spring and weather goes. We also have a cow-calf operation that we've tried to incorporate into doing some grazing on our cover crops. And actually we have a flock of sheep now too. So we're trying multi-species grazing on some of our cover crop land where we have fences and the ability to keep them in. So it's a little bit about us and our operation.
Great, thank you. Let's move to the next question for each one of you, and let's go back to Leon. And Leon, how did you decide to incorporate cover crops into your farm?
I don't know that it was a decision. It was just something that it's more of an evolution than a decision, because that's something that people did for years and years here in our heavy clay soils. It's more figuring out what works and how you can manage it. I guess when you say start out, basically using the clovers, and then from there we started incorporating like the cereal rye after corn, and then you see what works and what doesn't. And I guess it's kind of an evolution, because you start out using a clover, and then you add maybe buckwheat, and that works, and then you add flax, and that works, and then you start adding the brassicas and the radish. The big kick a few years back was the tillage radish, and you put those in the mix, and then it works. Well, then you get too many, and then you back off on that, and then you fill the holes with something different. And over time, you learn. I guess for us, it's more what grows and what works in our soils. What works for you may not work for me, but it's kind of a trial and error thing, if that makes sense. It's just I want to plant stuff that consistently will perform for me year after year, and I kind of know that. And then I always try. I'll throw in a little of this and a little of that, and see if it works, and if it doesn't, I can back out. For instance, a couple of years ago, I tried chicory. It performed very well, but it's hard to kill. And so, there's some trade-offs there. Your rapeseed, your kales, they perform very well. They grow very well, but they're difficult to kill when you're using conventional corns. So I've dropped those out of there. And then I use a fairly high, I shouldn't say high amount of seed, but I'll use vetches and clovers for the nitrogen. Well, then I feel like I'm a little bit short on carbon. So last year I threw some cereal rye in with it. And then the other factor involved is if I'm seeding with the H2 Ohio program, before that came about, I would harvest wheat, plant my cover crop, and then come back in, say in mid to late August with turkey litter or my cattle manure after I had some growth. But then with the H2 Ohio program, it changed all that. So we had to have manure spread before we could plant our cover crops, which now they're going to change that back again. But by planting cover crops later, then I have to be careful, because if I plant a sorghum sudan grass or sunflowers or well, I'll use those two for an example. If we get an early September or late September frost, we don't get a lot of growth. And so then you have to work around that. So it's kind of a juggling act. I don't know if that's making sense to everybody, but it's just, it's a series of trade-offs in what works for you and what works and what doesn't work and what works for me. And everybody's system is a little bit different. So I guess I feel that there's a place for everybody, but you have to be very flexible.
That's a great answer, Leon. I have a follow-up question for you because I think people that will be listening to this broadcast who may be hesitant to start with cover crops, what would be your advice for somebody who wants to try it, who's never tried it before?
That's a good question. I'm kind of an all-in person. If we're going to do it, let's go big or go home, which isn't always the right answer. But if you're going to harvest wheat and plant corn next year, and you're bound and determined that you want to go, or well, let's say for instance you put in drainage tile and you have to level it or something, or if you want to go in and just work the wheat stubble down, go in and plant an oats and radish mix, something that will winter kill, something. Just get something out there, get the ground covered, get some experience with that. It's if you're going to no-till beans into corn, try some cereal rye. I mean, it's simple, but the biggest thing, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but we kind of lose track of how things work, and I know there's a lot of farmers out there, and some of them make it work we can't here. But they'll plant cereal rye ahead of a corn crop. So you have a grass crop ahead of a grass crop. And so then you run into nitrogen issues. And there's a lot of, how do I want to say this? There's a lot of thought processes and a lot of biology and a lot of planning that goes into these things. And try to keep it as simple as possible until you get a little bit of comfort. I can remember when I started planting green, with beans, and it's terrifying. Well, now I don't think anything about it. Now I'm planting corn green, and it's still terrifying. But I can plant it. I can get it to work some of the time. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
yeah, perfect. Thank you. Well, Les, what about you? How did you decide to incorporate cover crops into your program?
Well, we got a long list of soil tests. I know we go back 18 years. We'd been no-tilling a long time, since 1986. Corn and beans mostly. We never seen an improvement in organic matter. It would be after a corn crop, you would bring it up a little bit, and then the bean crop would mine it off, and you could never see that you was gaining anything. I mean, our soils were improved. We handled erosion thing a lot better, but we could never build these soils up. And then it went back to what Leon said. We're not doing anything different than what our grandparents and parents did. Planting something else out there, and started experimenting with these cover crops. And we rented a farm that had wheat on it, and we started, I guess at that time, with peas and radishes with the help of David Brandt, and we put that out there, and seen some really neat things going on. So that kind of convinced us. And then as we kept wheat, we knew we needed to get wheat back in our rotation, so we did that. And that gave us the opportunity to do some of these things in the summertime, whether we needed some drainage work or something like that. We had the ability to tackle some of those projects easier, but always get a cover crop growing on that. And you could see that in our soil tests, we were starting to build better organic levels after we had those cover crops out there. So then our situation was corn and beans and a little bit of wheat. So we started the interseeding of cereal rye was the main the main one we leaned on, and it got interseeded in corn and soybeans, sometimes around Labor Day or after that. And getting something out there we knew was important. And I'm not advocating for cereal rye, because Leon's right. We had to change our planting thinking and get more nitrogen on at planting time for the corn crop that was going to follow that. And I think we've gotten a ways through that now. We don't use a lot of the in-furrow ortho and poly programs on the seed. We've gotten away from that, and we put some micronutrients. We actually haven't planted a corn crop, 8 corn crops now, and we haven't put any phosphorus down. We've I use calcium in the furrow on the seed with some other micronutrients. And honestly, I think that was one of the best things we've ever come across. And I think it goes back to making that transition. When we started no-tilling, we was using all conventional tillage equipment, whether it was gauge wheels on a planter or closing wheels. We took that same planter out and tried to no-till. And a lot of times we had issues with that. And now we're planting green on corn and soybeans, and seeing a lot of good things happen. And this whole thing's about the transition you have to make from conventional farming to no-till farming, whether it's machinery changes on your planter. Everybody used to think you had to have a no-till coulter. We've done away with that many years ago. We've got 3-inch wide gauge wheels on our planter units because they run more precise now, and we're not going into conventional tilled fields. Closing wheels, we play with that every year. I always buy something different and try different closing wheels on each planter for corn and soybeans. Just trying different things, because it's constantly evolving with the attachments and tools that we're presented with, and we're blessed with a lot of them. I mean, our guidance systems have made this thing so much easier to deal with. But we're really doing nothing different than our grandparents and people before us were doing. And now we're seeing these organic matter levels increase because of this. So.
Could I interrupt here just a minute before we move on? Les, you touched on something, and back to your question for me, Jim. What we are finding, and this is kind of old school again, but as you progress into these systems, I guess I kind of had an aha moment the last couple of years that pH and calcium are probably a lot more critical than a lot of it than in the conventional systems. And maybe Les, you have some comment to make about that.
Yeah, I'll go into a little bit of my thoughts on that. I mean, we went through a lot of different starters, 2x2s and in furrows, 9-18-9s and 4-10-10s. And I mean, there was a bunch of them. I never felt like they added as much value as me taking the phosphorus completely out of the in-furrow stuff. And I got calcium in there now. I got boron in there, zinc. I use a lot of Stoller products, and I can't name them all right now, but there's just a lot of things. And I know it's working because I see where the planter shuts off and delays, on the ends. And you can tell that when I'm side dressing, how that affected that early emergence and early start of that corn plant. And that's what we no-tilled for a long time, and we never realized the importance of that. We changed that whole system because of the soils, how we was approaching it, and we never really done a lot of change. And we thought it all had to be mechanical, by putting something different on the planter and attachments and all that kind of crap. But it really was what that plant needed in our environment we was working in. And I'd go so far to say, when you're planting into a green cover, there's a pretty good chance that that soil is as warm as a conventional field could be, because if you're planting into rye that's 4 foot tall or whatever it is, that you're harvesting sunlight from the 1st of April or whenever that thing takes off and makes it grow, and you're warming up that top couple inches of that soil where we're planting this corn seed and soybean seed. And I know a tillage pass will add 10 degrees on a good sunny day, but you've also added a few problems by destroying your biological life, your earthworm channels, and all the good things that we're trying to leave alone out there. But Leon's right. I mean, the ratio of calcium and magnesium, and these are heavy clay soils up here. I know Leon's county's has more predominantly clay soils than Fulton County. Fulton County has 60 some different soil types, and at last I looked, we farm over 30 of them. So we got lots of variability. We got no one parcel of land that would be one soil type up here. It's a whole gamut of things, but the resiliency of all of them working together, I mean, in what we're doing, I see that as a big benefit.
Wow, great discussion. But I don't want to leave out Nathan. Nathan, what about you? How did you incorporate, or why and how did you incorporate and decide to incorporate cover crops into your program?
So I guess, a little bit in my introduction there, I mentioned Ed Winkle, and Ed was really the one that kind of gave me the bug. We farmed some pretty rolling ground in places, and some pretty really flat ground in places. And so, I was seeing erosion issues, and, I really was trying to figure out how could I stop that. And through my meeting of Ed and having discussions with him and seeing the benefits he was having with things, I decided to try a little bit of cereal rye ahead of soybeans. And so that was my first start into it. Got along really good with it the first year. I had my scary times where I wasn't real sure about what I was doing. Time I got to planting it, we didn't get it terminated early, and I was planting in the 6-foot cereal rye, and really was scared. But that year, I think that actual was a field that had some terraces on it, was a really rolling field, and our soybeans were 4 or 5 bushel better that year on that field than what we'd had in the past, and that was really what got me excited about it. Then we started moving our equipment around and being able to get to where we could be able to drill our cover crops after soybeans in the fall. We were primarily trying to get cereal rye planted, ahead of corn, or ahead of soybeans, I'm sorry. And, and down here, even there's a lot of soybeans on soybeans, and, we've tried to limit that as much as possible now. But, even when we started, we were doing a lot of soybeans on soybeans. And so I was wanting to maybe make sure that I got that grass crop in there as a cover in between. So, and we really started seeing, and what started convincing me more was starting to see the reduction in weed pressure and resistant weeds. And I was really able to cut back on some of my chemistries that I was using because we were suppressing those weeds. And just kind of one thing led to another. Then we started cutting back a little bit on some fertility that we were adding, and we're getting along really well. Yields weren't going down. We were still having just as good yields. And then actually we have on one of the farms that I rent, there's a sow unit on it, and the guys that own that and run that, they have the manure on it drag lined onto our fields. And so kind of my aha moment was I was planting corn, and well, it was in the spring, and they come in and pump manure, And as soon as they got done pumping manure, we got within a couple of days, we had a big rain, and I just knew that I was losing nutrients. And then the next fall, they showed up in early October, and the ground was still really warm, and I knew that I was losing a lot of nitrogen. And so I guess what really pushed me to learn more and drive more into it was how could I capture more nutrients, and hold those nutrients from that manure applications. And so that kind of drove me into doing a little bit more multi-species things, because even with the hog manure, we were still showing some nitrogen deficiencies in our corn when we just had straight cereal rice. So then we've added in some clovers and some different things even on our manure ground, and have gotten along really good. And originally we were terminating all of our cover crops early, and I knew that I was leaving money on the table by doing that. I knew if I let the plant grow that I would have more roots in the soil, we'd have bigger biomasses, and be able to hopefully grow our soil health faster. And so I think about 7 or 8 years ago was really when we decided to change our operation and try to plant green as much as we possibly can. We bought a roller crimper, and so we have, on our soybeans, sometimes we'll roll crimp ahead of the beans, but we've also come back in and crimp some after we planted the beans, even when beans are up to the second trifoliate. We don't do a whole lot of that, but we've done some and got along really well with it. And then just going to meetings and stuff and talking and sharing with other producers around the state and around the country what they're doing, and has inspired me to want to do more and bring back things to my farm and try things on my farm, and to share with others. We've done 60-inch corn, trying to figure out the grazing thing. How do we grow more biomass and be able to get the cattle out, and the sheep out? Just sharing with others and learning from others has inspired me, and wanted me to take my farming operation to the next level, I guess.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. I could ask 1,000 more questions of all three of you, but I'd like to move on and let Gigi ask you a question.
Nathan, you kind of led us right into our next question, which has to do with the aha moment, about your cropping system, cover crop systems. Do you have anything additional you want to add about your aha moment?
Well, I guess I had another aha moment. A few years ago, I had some Ohio Farm Bureau interns out here that were going to be working at the state fair in our land of the living building, and they were going to focus on soil health. And so they come down here and they wanted a tour. So we kind of walked around the farm a little bit, and was showing them different species of cover crops and digging up roots and that thing. And I've always got a shovel in the back of the truck or back of the gator, no matter what's going on. And so I took them across the road here, to another farm that was one of the first farms that I really tried to push cover crops on. And so we took a shovel full of the soil that was on my farm, and then we went directly across the fence row about 5 feet and dug up a shovel full of soil from the neighbor's farm. And the neighbor's farm had been very heavy tillage, high amounts of fertilizer, just had been beaten down pretty hard. And to see the difference between my soil and how theirs was just this chocolate. It wasn't even chocolate, it was milky, had no soil structure to it at all. There was no worms, there was nothing in it to mine that had all these platelets in it, and the soil aggregates and the earthworms. We could count, I don't know, there were 15 or 20 earthworms in mine, and there was like 2 in the one that we dug up across the road. And just to see that from one side of the road to the other was a big aha moment for them, but for myself too. I'd never really had jumped across the road and dug a shovel full of the neighbors, but to know their practices compared to what my practices were, and to see the difference in my soil, that was like, no matter what, the struggles I have, the challenges I have, I know that my soils at the end of the day is going to be produce better crops in the long run than compared to what's across the road. And that was a big aha moment for me.
Very good. Les, what's your aha moment with cover crops?
I'm going to say it probably goes to understanding more about the biological activity in the soil. I mean, we were using neonic treated seed for a long time because we didn't know any better. If we seen something out there during the growing season, we probably sprayed insecticide on it because we thought it was a bad thing. And now we eliminate that kind of stuff and just focus on the beneficials. And if you've got a good amount of beneficials, I haven't seen where we have lost a crop or took a big hit because of insect pressure, whether it be weevils in alfalfa. I mean, there's just every crop has a challenge sometime. Armyworms in barley or wheat, things like that. There was an outbreak in my neighborhood within a couple miles of where we had a really great field of barley. The neighbor had armyworms that it just wiped out a bunch of his. And we didn't have any, and nobody could understand why. And I'm convinced that the more you get into these type of systems, the longer you've been in it, and you wean yourself off the neonics and the insecticides in general, any of that kind of stuff, you build that predator relationship. I'm pretty sure that if you leave it go, we could get a handle on soybean cyst nematode, western bean cutworm, all these problems that we create because we've went in there and sprayed insecticides over the top of a living crop and killed off beneficials. And that's where I'm at today. And it took me a long time to understand that, but I would say that's my aha. Understanding the connection. Everything is connected.
Yes, it is. Leon, what's your aha moment?
My aha moment, I guess this sounds kind of crazy, but like I said earlier, we farm very flat, heavy clay soils, and we use a lot of pattern tile, pattern drainage here. In fact, we're now to the point where we put in 3-inch tile every 20 feet. And I had a field that was planted to cover crops a few years back. I hadn't farmed it very long. I had my cover crop planted, and we went in and we used a tile plow and plowed in tile. And I had noticed that it had a fair amount of compaction, a little bit deeper. We had, I think, maybe 1 or 2 rotations of cover crop through it, but it was still pretty tight. We went in and ripped it, and with the tile plow, and within a week or two, the amount of sunflowers that were blooming, you could see right where we stopped running the tile plow, the aeration was affecting things 10 foot from the rip. I wish I'd have taken pictures of it because the sunflowers were blooming real heavy, a lot of color. You got to the end of where we were tiling, and this is dry weather. And I come to realize that, from a soil health perspective, aeration and compaction are one of the big killers. And I think one of the questions on the list is, what would you do over? I guess if I had any advice for anybody who was considering, soil health or no-tilling or cover crops, get the compaction out first. I know there's a lot of talk that covers will take out compaction over time, and I don't disagree with that. The other aha moment is we take a lot of this for granted anymore. I don't think anything about it. I had an individual from Soil and Water come out. He was riding with me one day when we were planting. I've got a roller crimper ahead of the tractor, and we crimp and then we plant into planting green. And we were out there, and he said, wow, he said, this field is just alive. And I started looking around, and we had birds and butterflies and insects and bees. And when you get out of the tractor, you could hear the bees humming, in the, around the blooms. And so it's just, it was kind of a, wow, this is alive and I'm just not paying attention type thing.
Well, Leon, I think you lead us into our next question that Man Bear is going to give us. And so if we could have a quick response from each of you.
Yeah, so Nathan kind of mentioned already, and Leo, you too, with regards to terminating cover crops, like Nathan mentioned, grazing could be an option or rolling it down. Based on your experiences, I'm gonna ask it to Lace. Based on your experience, what's the best way to terminate cover crops, or do they really need to be terminated at first? What's your experience with that?
Well, last year was a very dry period for us. We raised our crop, a really good crop, on 14 inches of rainfall. That's corn and beans were really good crops. Not the best, but certainly not the worst. And I'm really greedy. So in the spring, I want to grow as much biomass as I can. And we never terminated till after planting. And I got burned on that. I had a bad experience on a couple areas where the cover crop had sucked too much water out of the land, and we had some emergence issues. And that corn it was in corn mainly. Beans, we didn't have any issues. But that corn laid in the ground till the end of June when we finally got our bailout rain. I mean, we always count on, Mother Nature bails us out no matter what. Always thought that was going to happen earlier, but it didn't happen till the last week of June last year. But that crop come up, and when it was all said and done at harvest time, that area was the best yielding of that field. And it was a hay field that was mostly grass hay. I didn't know we was even going to farm it until I was planting corn in the rest of the farm. And the landowner said, "Hey, plant that to hay. I don't want to make hay, or plant that to corn. I don't want to make hay anymore." So this thing was green. It was grass. It had been established for many, many years. And it had sucked out the water worse than anything I ever seen. But we went in there immediately and sprayed it. And then we roller crimped it down, both 2 times roller crimping, because it wasn't, the problem with roller crimping is the plant needs to be mature to get that full advantage. So we sprayed it with the herbicides. We lean on glyphosate for that. And we have a roller crimper. We bought one with another producer because we didn't know if we could justify it. And I like the roller crimping idea, and we can definitely shave herbicide costs with that. But we also, if you're planting before that crop gets mature, it's really difficult to get that crop to stay down. And if you've got tillers on a cereal rye crop, late tillers that come up, you're probably not going to lay them down. So there's issues. But I believe in the roller crimper thing, and we have cut herbicides where we have good stanza covers. And we had crops last year fields last year that we only used glyphosate for a herbicide after planting. But there's so many things there. I mean, in this whole thing, I have to say, is management. You have to have your management to think about what's going to happen next. Now, this year, we're going to look at this whole thing. If we don't see our subsoil moistures getting recharged good through this winter, we will probably terminate everything earlier just because of that. I let them go too far last year, and I made a mistake. But when we got done, I don't know that we really took a big hit on yield because things really happened well for us. And maybe we just got lucky. I don't know. Hope that answers your question.
No, that's a great feedback. Leo, do you have anything specific to add with respect to termination, grazing, herbicide, tillage, roller crimping? Leo.
We use a roller crimper. I don't anticipate it killing anything. It's just helps me manage my biomass. if my cereal rye is tall, I mean, it'll knock that down. We can plant into it. Corn, when we're planting corn, I'll roll it down. And as soon as we're done planting, we'll be over it with a sprayer, to burn that off. We're getting some good grass control from that. I like the roller crimper. If nothing else, it kind of knocks down the residue. It makes it, it's not as, stalks aren't as hard on the tires. It's a tool I use. I don't use it all the time if I don't need it. From my experience, I know Nathan had some success with it. I've rolled beans after they've been up, and if you have a heavy stand of cereal rye, for me, it's always knocked the yields back the times that I've tried it. So I typically don't roll anything after I've planted. If I roll during the planting, that's fine, but I typically don't go back with a crimper after planting anymore. And that's just there again, that's my experience. But as far as chemicals, it's, I'm using conventional corn and traded beans, and that's what works for us. And everybody's operation's different.
Well, Leon, Les, Nathan, we really appreciate your time and your insights into the use of cover crops for improving soil health. And I think one of the take-home messages that I see between the answers that all three of you have provided is that you're really targeting the principles of soil health that are promoted by the NRCS across the country. And so, cover crops leading to soil cover. You talked about increasing biodiversity. You basically touched on maximizing or maintaining living root systems throughout the system. And then Nathan, at least you mentioned introduction of livestock, and all three of you talked about biodiversity, all these principles that we need to follow, and cover crops certainly play a role in this. So again, thanks for your insight. And if we have any additional questions, or if audience members have questions, we'll be sure to reach out to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was a great discussion, a lot of good information. So we are getting a lot of questions with regards to what kind of species there are in the cover crop mixes. Leon, do you want to give a bit of information with that regards? Like at the moment, what are the species that you are using in your cover crop mix?
Can you hear me, Van Beer?
Yes.
Okay. I use a blend. It's kind of tailored to, there we go. It's kind of tailored to what works in our soils. I've got my go-to covers that I use every year: the buckwheat, the sunflower, the sorghum sudan grass, the radishes, flax, those oats. Those grow every year. I mean, it's just, you kind of put them out there and they grow. And then along with that, I'll have my vetch. I've tried common, I've tried hairy. I kind of lean towards hairy for, I don't know, I just think it performs better. Red clover, sweet clover, crimson clover, which are kind of native to our soils, for as long as I can remember. Maybe not so much the crimson, but the red and the sweet. And then I'll try maybe some millet or some mung beans. Sun hemp will work if it's really, really dry. Phacelia will work if you can get it up and it stays dry. But if we have heavy rains, it'll not wipe out the phacelia. This year, I in the spring, my mixes are pretty top heavy with legumes. And so this year I added some cereal rye into it just to add a little bit of carbon into it. But I'll typically try something. Chicory, it grows well, but it's very hard to kill. Rape, I use that, or kale, I've used that for quite a few years, but it's harder to kill, and so I've left that one out. chicory is the same way. It's just hard to kill. And so I leave them out so I can manage the covers easier in the spring.
Great, thank you, Leon. I'm going to jump to a different question. This one is for you, Nathan. Matthew asked, I'm interested in hearing more about Nathan's experience with 60-inch corn rows. What cover crops are you using in between the rows?
So it's been a couple years since we tried 60-inch corn, and actually, since corn prices last few years have kind of skyrocketed, it's not been as feasible for us to try. I think that year we had about a 20 bushel difference in our yields, so we've kind of pulled back from that. But that year I think we tried some annual ryegrass, I think there was some clovers in it, there was rape in it, turnips, radishes. That was kind of the mix that we put in there. We had decent growth with it, but it wasn't necessarily to my expectations of what I really was hoping for. To be able to make that more feasible, it's something that I want to try again. But again, with $5 corn, that's hard to justify. We've done 60-inch corn and tried to interseed. We've also done 30-inch corn and tried to interseed it too, and just at that V6 stage, and we still struggle. But you gotta, annual ryegrass seems to be out of everything that we've tried, seems to be able to take the shading the best. Some of your cereal rye and oats and that kind of thing, they don't take the shading nearly as well. So that's still to be determined, I guess.
Great. Very interesting question from Melissa. What is the one thing you wish you would have done sooner in your program? Nathan, do you want to answer that first?
I guess something I wish we'd have started sooner was planting green. There was a lot of years where we were terminating our covers really early just because we thought that was the way that we should be doing it. And, we have seen our soil health grow a lot faster since we've added the biomass and cutting out, Les mentioned, cutting out the insecticides, and that is something that we have done also. And I wish that we would have started that a lot sooner too.
Great. Leon, do you have a golden nugget there?
I guess if I would have to say, if I'd had it to do over, and I don't necessarily practice what I preach, but I'm not so sure it would have been beneficial to go in and, pardon me, deep rip it and get covers into it just to break the deeper compaction up before we started. Yeah, you can eliminate compaction over time with covers and no-till, but I really feel that, and maybe push the calcium a little bit harder, push the lime and the gypsum a little bit harder, go in, rip it, get everything opened up so you can get the roots through rather than wait for the roots to make their own channels.
Well, I have actually one more question. It's not in the Q&A, but I have a question for both of you, and it has to do with soil health because that's the theme of the webinar series. And I'm wondering if you can, both of you, comment quickly on soil health. What have you seen in terms of improvements in soil health? Have you quantified improvements in soil health, or maybe what kind of programs you use to actually quantify changes in soil health in your systems? And I'll start with you, Leon.
What we've done is, and we'll do the CO2 burst. Through the years, I've sent samples to Cornell for the soil health test, Woods End. We've done the Haney test this last year. And can you quantify it? Absolutely. Your Solvita, test, it's just the soil. it feels alive. I can't smell, but I can feel it. But yeah, I mean, we've got the numbers to validate that what we're doing is the soil is more biologically active. You know, and we do, you know, a new field and an old field, and it's we can see it year after year.
Nathan?
Yeah, we've done a lot of Haney tests over the years, and going back to, you know, some of the beginning, the very first ones that we've done to where we are now, you can see a big change in our soils. But, you know, again, I think the biggest thing is just by taking shovel out and digging around in your soils and seeing what's there and looking at the soils and understanding and knowing the changes and seeing the earthworms and the worm mittens and all that. I mean, that has been my biggest thing, you know. Again, we don't want to trespass on our neighbors, but, you know, I do a lot of custom work for different farmers around, you know, our area, and seeing my soils and seeing theirs and seeing my yields and my inputs compared to what the inputs of others are. You know, financially, I know my farming is more stable because my soil health is better, and I'm able to cut back on nutrients and chemicals and all of that, and I'm raising as good or better yields than what the neighbors are.
Great, thank you. Gigi, would you like to wrap us up?
Do. Back to sharing the screen here. Okay, so for today's CCA credits, you do need to make sure you pull out your phone and scan this QR code. If you need to use the link, I'll provide that here in just, well, there it went. There's the link to get the credits. Make sure you fill out the information that is provided, and I guess it's automatically transitioning for me. And what's up next is we do have What's the Beef with Soil Health and Livestock on March the 7th. So sign up to join us again if you haven't already done so. We have the upcoming agronomy programs for Weeds University on February 21st. We do have 12 different locations across the state, so make sure you do get signed up for those. Our closing date is February the 16th. Our Conservation Tillage Conference is on March the 12th through 13th in Ada, Ohio, and you do have that event information there in the agcrops.osu.edu under events.
Gigi, can
Yes.
you go back to the QR code real quick?
That's what I want to do. We'll go back here to the QR code to give you guys a few more seconds to be able to scan it. Once you open it up, you'll be able to automatically sign you in. I'll go to the next ones, the other direction. If you do need to type in the address, it is listed here in the blueprint, certifiedcropsadvisor.org/continuing-education/missing-CEUs. CEUS. Your meeting code for today is OH55849. Once again, we'll see you on March the 7th for our third and final session of soil health webinar for the 2024 season. What's the beef with soil health and livestock? Thanks and have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine.